12 days before his wedding. My son Brandon called me and said those words that still echo in my chest. "Mom, don't come. You are in that wheelchair now, and honestly, I am embarrassed. My fiancé's family, my business associates, having you there would just make everyone uncomfortable." So I hung up that phone, called my attorney, and rewrote my entire will, leaving everything I would spend 40 years building to my daughter Lucy. Let me tell you how it all began. Back when I was 72 and my world turned upside down in a single afternoon. Before we start, drop a comment about a time someone underestimated you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. These stories about family dynamics and standing up for yourself really seem to resonate with all of you. The heart attack happened on a Tuesday in March, right there in my office at Sunrise Commercial Development. One minute I was reviewing blueprints for a new shopping center. The next I was waking up in intensive care with tubes down my throat, and my left side completely useless. The doctors used words like significant damage and permanent disability. But what they really meant was that Eleanor Patterson, who had built a real estate empire from nothing, would now need help getting dressed each morning. But here is what nobody understood. My mind stayed sharp as a tack. When your body betrays you and people start talking slower, looking past you like you are already gone, you notice everything. Every eye roll, every impatient sigh, every conversation that stops when your wheelchair rolls into the room. I was still completely there, processing every detail, remembering every slight. Lucy moved in 3 days after I got home from the hospital. Didn't make any big announcement, didn't ask for praise. Just showed up with her suitcase and a bag of practical supplies, saying she would take the guest room downstairs. She started managing my medications, helping with transfers from bed to chair, organizing my physical therapy schedule, handling the endless insurance paperwork. Never once complained about her divorce being put on hold or her own life getting derailed. Brandon visited exactly 4 times that first month. Brought expensive flower arrangements and a fancy tablet he said would help me stay connected, then disappeared back to his corner office at the downtown branch of my company. He ran our residential development division, or at least, that is what he called it. Like I hadn't spent 25 years building that business from a single rental property and a second mortgage on this house, I let him think he was in charge. My voice was still weak from the breathing tubes, and arguing took more energy than I had. Lucy did the actual work, managing my care, handling the household, keeping track of my medical appointments. Brandon did the networking, taking clients to expensive lunches, making presentations at investment meetings, posing for photos at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Lucy wiped my chin when I struggled with soup. Brandon updated me on profit margins once a week and left out anything that might worry me. Lucy helped me maintain my dignity every single day. Brandon helped himself to credit for my life's work. What neither of them knew was that every property deed, every business license, every bank account was still solely in my name. People assumed I would already started transferring assets to my children. I hadn't. I was still watching, still learning who my kids really were when they thought I wasn't paying attention. Brandon never really saw Lucy at all. During one video conference call, he forgot to mute himself and called her the house ghost to someone off camera. I watched Lucy's face when she heard it through the laptop speakers. She didn't flinch, just kept folding my laundry like those words hadn't landed like a punch. But I saw her hands pause for just a moment before continuing. Then Kimberly entered our lives like a perfectly styled hurricane. I knew her type before she spoke a single word. Polished blonde hair that cost more than some people's rent, thin in that way that requires constant maintenance, beautiful in that carefully constructed manner that screams expensive training. She carried herself like someone who would learn to navigate wealthy social circles, but hadn't been born into them. Brandon met her at some charity gala for childhood literacy. Ironic, considering she would prove to be illiterate when it came to reading Human Decency. Lucy looked her up that first night. Former pageant contestant, marketing degree from a state school, a few years working for some luxury lifestyle brand that folded during the pandemic. Her social media was full of designer outfits and exotic vacation photos. But Lucy noticed the backgrounds were always someone else's houses, someone else's yachts. Kimberly had grown up with money. You could tell by her posture. The way she expected doors to be opened for her. But somewhere along the way, that money had disappeared, and she was working hard to marry her way back to the lifestyle she considered her birthright. Brandon brought her to dinner after their third date. She smiled at Lucy like she was hired help, called me Mrs. Patterson in that syrupy, sweet voice reserved for elderly relatives you are trying to impress. Not once did she ask about my recovery or my comfort. Instead, she spent the evening cataloging our possessions with her eyes: the crystal chandelier in the dining room, the original oil paintings my late husband had collected, the antique silver that had been in my family for generations. Lucy made her famous pot roast. Kimberly picked at it delicately and mentioned she was doing a cleanse, then drank 3 glasses of our best wine. Brandon told her I still owned 18 commercial properties throughout the metro area. Still owns, Kimberly repeated, looking at me like I was an exotic animal in a zoo. Brandon laughed nervously. Well, yeah, Mom's still technically the owner. I mean, I run everything day to day, but the paperwork hasn't been transferred yet. She studied me with new interest, like she was recalculating an equation in her head. After dessert, she leaned into Brandon and said loud enough for me to hear, "You will be taking over completely soon, though, right?" I mean, with her condition, I pretended to be focused on my coffee, but I filed that moment away in my memory. Over the next few months, I watched Kimberly insert herself into Brandon's life like invasive ivy. She started attending his business meetings, claiming she was helping with his personal brand. New haircut, new wardrobe, new website for the company that suddenly featured Brandon front and center with no mention of the woman who had built it from nothing. Lucy noticed it first. "Mom, have you seen Brandon's new business cards? Your name isn't anywhere on them." She showed me the sleek design. Brandon Morrison, CEO, Sunrise Commercial Development. As if he would founded the company himself. Brandon stopped asking Lucy to deliver contracts to the office. He hired a courier service instead. Kimberly said it looked more professional. She also convinced him to redecorate their shared condo in all-white furniture, with no personal photos, no family history. Everything looked like a showroom for people who would never actually lived anywhere. One evening, I heard Kimberly talking through Brandon's phone speaker while he was in the kitchen. "Your mother's situation is unfortunate, but we cannot let it define your public image. This is about positioning you for the next level. Family baggage doesn't photograph well." Brandon didn't disagree. That is when I knew he was lost. Lucy tried to speak up once during a family dinner. "Brandon, don't you think Mom should be included in major company decisions?" "She built all of this." He cut her off, sharply. "You don't understand what leadership requires. Lucy, this isn't about feelings, it is about business strategy." Lucy didn't respond, but I saw her face as she cleared the dinner plates later. Her hands were trembling slightly. That night, I started making phone calls, not to change anything yet, just to verify what was mine. Every deed, every account, every business license. I wanted to be absolutely certain of my legal standing before I made any decisions. Then, 12 days before the wedding, Brandon called me. No small talk, no warmth in his voice. "Mom, I have been thinking about the wedding, and I don't think you should come. Having you there in the wheelchair, it is going to make things awkward. Kimberly's family is very image conscious, and honestly, some of my business contacts will be there. It is better for everyone if you sit this one out." He said it like he was canceling a lunch appointment. Like my presence at my own son's wedding was an inconvenience to be managed. I didn't say a word. I simply hung up the phone. Then I turned to Lucy, who was organizing my evening medications at the kitchen table. "Pack what we need," I said quietly. "We are leaving." She didn't ask questions. She just stood up and walked toward my bedroom to start gathering essentials. That night, while Lucy packed our belongings, I sat staring at a framed photograph on my nightstand. It showed me at 45, standing in front of the construction site that would become my first major commercial development. I looked fierce in that picture, arms crossed, hard hat slightly askew, concrete dust on my jacket. I remembered that day clearly. The general contractor had tried to tell me the project was too ambitious for someone like me. I would fired him on the spot and found someone who believed in my vision. That photo had sat on my office desk for decades, a reminder that I would never back down from a challenge. I took it with me when we left that house forever. Lucy helped me into the van before dawn. We drove away without leaving a note, without informing Brandon or his secretary or even my lawyer. We simply vanished from the life we would build. I never set foot in that house again. And I didn't miss a single thing about it. The apartment Lucy found was smaller but perfectly designed for wheelchair accessibility, wide doorways, roll-in shower, kitchen counters at the right height. Lucy unpacked methodically, organizing my medications by time of day, arranging my books within reach, hanging my clothes by color and season. She didn't cry once, even though I knew she had questions about what came next. I didn't speak Brandon's name. I didn't mention the word wedding. Lucy didn't bring it up either. But on the fourth day, Lucy returned from checking our mail with a cream-colored envelope. She placed it on the kitchen table without comment. The wedding invitation, with elegant script and a formal RSVP card enclosed. I stared at it while Lucy made afternoon tea. Then, I pushed it off the edge of the table with the back of my hand and let it fall into the trash can below. That was my response. Brandon didn't call again. Neither did Kimberly. But I watched their wedding photos appear on social media. Kimberly in a dress that could have paid for a car. Brandon in a tuxedo I hadn't purchased. They stood under elaborate floral arches, holding hands like they would build something meaningful together. Lucy showed me a photo. Someone had tagged them in. Kimberly had written the caption, "A new chapter begins. Building something beautiful together." No mention of family. No mention of the woman who had actually built the foundation they were standing on. That night, I asked Lucy to bring me the lockbox from under my bed. It was heavy and metal and contained every important document from the past 30 years. Lucy unlocked it for me when my fingers couldn't manage the key. I pulled out the folder labeled estate planning. Lucy sat across from me at the kitchen table, waiting quietly. I removed the old version of my will, the one that split everything 60-40 between Brandon and Lucy. That document had been untouched for 5 years, written back when I thought my son understood the value of family loyalty. I tore it in half. Lucy didn't react. "I am not doing this out of spite," I told her, looking directly into her eyes. She nodded. "I know." I handed her a pen. "You are the primary beneficiary now. Start writing where it says asset distribution." She took the pen without hesitation. I dictated slowly and clearly. The commercial properties, the residential developments, the investment accounts, the retirement funds, all of it. Not as punishment for Brandon, but as recognition of reality. Lucy had done the work. She had stayed. She had sacrificed her own life to ensure mine continued with dignity. There was no empire to inherit. There was just responsibility that needed managing. And she had already proven she could handle it. When the paperwork was signed and notarized, I felt something release in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, and not anger. Just relief. Like a weight had shifted to the person who was already carrying it anyway. We mailed the legal documents the next morning. I didn't call Brandon to warn him. I didn't explain my decision. If he wanted to marry someone who valued public image over family bonds, he could learn how quickly that image crumbles when it is built on borrowed foundation. A week later, I received an email from one of our property managers. Brandon had tried to authorize a major renovation on one of our retail centers and been denied. His name wasn't on the ownership documents. He was confused, asking if there had been some clerical error. I replied myself, "No error. This property is under new management. Please direct all future business inquiries to Lucy Patterson, acting owner." I didn't get a response to that email, but Lucy got a phone call that evening from our company's board chairman. Brandon had been blindsided during their quarterly meeting when he realized he no longer held voting rights on any company decisions. He would stormed out, muttering something about calling lawyers. Lucy remained calm. "He can challenge whatever he wants," she said, matter-of-factly. "We followed proper legal procedure. Everything is documented and witnessed. He has no standing to contest anything. I nodded, proud of her composure. Brandon had assumed power was permanent just because it was familiar. The next morning, Lucy listed the family house with a real estate agent. I didn't go back for the photography session. I didn't want to see Brandon's childhood bedroom or the kitchen, where I would made countless birthday cakes, or the living room where we would opened Christmas presents for 30 years. That life was finished. Lucy took down the photograph of me at the construction site and hung it in our new kitchen. It didn't match the modern appliances or the sleek cabinets, but it belonged with us. When Kimberly posted photos from their honeymoon in Costa Rica, I barely glanced at them. When she posted inspirational quotes about leaving behind what no longer serves you, I actually smiled. She thought she was the one walking away, but I had already left that relationship behind. The following week, Lucy attended her first meeting as controlling owner of Sunrise Commercial Development. She wore a navy blazer she hadn't touched since her old job in corporate training. She didn't say much during the meeting, just listened carefully to everyone's reports. Then, when the room fell quiet, she said, "Here is what we are going to change moving forward." She presented a comprehensive plan that addressed every inefficiency Brandon had ignored for 3 years. New vendor relationships, streamlined approval processes, better profit margins for all our properties. The CFO emailed me that afternoon. She is impressive. Really knows the business. I wrote back one word, naturally. That evening, I was sitting in the living room when Lucy walked in carrying a glass of wine. She stood there for a moment, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Do you miss him?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, "He made his choice, so did I." She nodded and went to her room. I stayed up late, thinking about all the nights I would spend alone, raising both children after their father died. The school pickup lines, the scraped knees I would bandaged, the birthday parties I would planned by myself. You don't realize how much love gets buried under years of being taken for granted. But when you finally stop waiting to be valued, you start seeing people clearly. That is when I understood. Brandon had been gone long before he made that phone call. I would just finally accepted it. The house sold within a week. The real estate agent was amazed. Properties like that usually sat on the market for months. But I knew better. Brandon had featured the house in several business magazine interviews, calling it a legacy property and a symbol of our family's success. Kimberly had posted photos from the living room back when she was still pretending to care about family connections. They had created a digital trail of desirability without realizing it, and the market responded exactly as I would expected. Lucy handled all the sale logistics while I monitored every detail from the apartment. Nothing was left behind. Not one family photo, not one piece of furniture. Not even the monogram towels Brandon had given me for Christmas, the year he started calling himself Chief Executive Officer. Lucy sold those towels online. They went for $35. That evening, I rolled into the kitchen where Lucy was updating our financial spreadsheets. "Do you think he has noticed yet?" I asked. She didn't look up from her laptop. Not until someone tells him no. It didn't take long. Brandon had scheduled a kitchen renovation in his condo, planning to update everything before Kimberly started hosting dinner parties for his business contacts. The contractor called our main office for authorization on the building permits, and Lucy intercepted the request. She told them plainly, "He is not the property owner. That building was sold last week. Please forward all inquiries to our legal department." 3 hours later, Brandon texted Lucy, "What is happening with the downtown building?" Lucy showed me the message, but didn't reply. The next day, we received notification that Brandon had attempted to transfer funds from the main business account linked to our commercial development division. The transaction was blocked. His access credentials had been automatically removed when the will was updated. He would never bothered to read the fine print of his employment contract. I had never added him as a legal co-owner, just as a manager operating under my license. Lucy now held controlling interest in everything. The IT department flagged his login attempt as unauthorized and locked him out of all systems. Brandon called the CFO. The CFO called Lucy. Lucy called our lawyers. Everything held firm. No loopholes. No gaps. no way back in. Brandon had never asked how the business was actually structured. He would just assumed everything belonged to him because he wore expensive suits and gave polished presentations. But he would never taken the financial risks. He would never signed the loan guarantees. He would never stayed awake, worried about making payroll during the lean years. Lucy pulled out our tax records from 15 years ago, showing the paper trail of every emergency loan I would taken to keep the business afloat. Every personal asset I would risked before we turned our first real profit. Brandon had arrived after the difficult years, smiled for the camera at grand openings, and posted the photos on LinkedIn. Kimberly had been pushing him toward what she called consolidation. Her emails were full of suggestions about streamlining his brand, increasing his equity, reducing family overhead. That meant eliminating me. That meant marginalizing Lucy. That meant cutting ties with the people who had made everything possible. 2 days after the house sale finalized, Brandon's credit card was declined at a business dinner. Kimberly paid the check. He didn't explain what had happened, at least not then. But I could imagine the embarrassment burning in his cheeks. He would always hated being caught off guard. Lucy forwarded me an email the next morning. Kimberly had contacted one of our senior marketing consultants, identifying herself as a corporate officer. She had no title, no authority, and no access to anything. The consultant ignored her completely and reported the incident directly to Lucy. Kimberly tried again through a different channel. This time her email bounced back. Lucy had the IT team flag her name and block all external access. She would also put Brandon's personal email on read-only status. No one called to argue. No one demanded explanations. They just followed the new chain of command. The system belonged to Lucy now. That evening, I watched a video from one of our company-wide virtual meetings. Lucy had scheduled it with just 48 hours' notice. She appeared on screen wearing a simple white blouse and no makeup, looking directly into the camera. "I am not going to pretend to be my brother," she said calmly. "You will not see me at networking events or in industry magazines. But I know this company inside and out. I have known it since it was 3 rental properties and a dream that kept my mother awake at night. She built this from nothing. I watched her do it. And I am not going to let it fall apart because someone confused looking successful with actually being successful." There was silence on the video call. Then someone off camera said, "We are behind you." The chat filled with supportive messages. One person simply wrote, "Finally, I watched that video 3 times, then forwarded it to our lawyer with a note. Save this. It matters." Lucy didn't want recognition. She just wanted the business to thrive. I could see the exhaustion in her face when she came home after long meetings, but she never complained. She would change into comfortable clothes and make dinner while reviewing employee schedules and vendor contracts. She asked for nothing. She didn't even want her photo on the company website yet. "Let them get used to the changes first," she said. "Results speak louder than announcements." Meanwhile, Brandon was falling apart. He started calling people. Investors, former colleagues, business contacts, one by one. They either redirected him to Lucy or ignored him completely. He posted a photo on his social media, showing him sitting in front of a closed laptop with the caption, "Exciting new ventures ahead." I nearly laughed out loud. He didn't have any new ventures. He didn't have the capital, the connections, or the credibility to start over. Kimberly smiled brilliantly in the background of that photo, still playing the role of supportive wife. She didn't know yet that she would marry a man with no actual assets, no real power, and no way back to the top. That is what made it perfect, she thought. She was climbing a social ladder. She was actually standing on air. Brandon texted me 3 days later. Just one word, "Why?" I didn't respond. I didn't owe him an explanation. Everything I would done was legal, fair, and completely justified. You don't hand control of an empire to someone who thinks it is owed to them. You give it to the person who earned it through sacrifice and loyalty. That was Lucy. She would never ask for it. She would simply proven herself worthy every single day. Brandon was about to learn what happens when you build your future on borrowed power and forget who actually owns the ground beneath your feet. He appeared at our apartment building 15 days after the wedding, standing outside in a wrinkled suit that hung wrong on his shoulders, sweating despite the cool morning air, unshaven and completely alone. Lucy saw him first through the peephole and didn't say anything. She just stood there with her hand on the doorknob, waiting. I heard his voice before I saw him. "Please," he said through the door. "I need to talk to her." "She is resting," Lucy replied, without opening the door. "I need to see her." "Kimberly's gone." I looked at Lucy. I didn't nod or give any signal, but she understood. She turned the handle. Brandon stepped inside like a man who had forgotten how to carry himself. His eyes swept the small apartment, the modest kitchen table, the medical equipment in the corner, the simple furniture that was clean and functional, but nothing like the mansion he was used to. He wasn't in a palace anymore, but it was real, stable, and honest. I stayed where I was in the living room, facing him. I didn't move forward. He didn't approach either. "She is gone," he said again, his voice cracking slightly. "Kimberly. She drugged me the night before our flight home. Said it was something to help me sleep off the jet lag. I woke up 14 hours later. She was gone. Everything was gone." He paused, swallowing hard. "My personal accounts, the cash we kept in the safe, my watch collection, jewelry, everything. Even the prenup. She somehow swapped it out. The version I signed is worthless. My lawyers said there is nothing to recover. She planned it perfectly. I waited, let him finish." He took a step closer, then stopped. "I didn't know she was like that. I thought she loved me, I thought." I cut him off, speaking slowly and quietly. "You thought I shouldn't be seen at your wedding." He froze. "That phone call," I continued. "That is when you lost everything. Not when she left you. Not when the money disappeared. When you told me my presence would embarrass you. That is the moment you gave up your family." He reached into his pocket like he was going to offer something, then realized he had nothing left. No keys, no credit cards, no leverage, just empty hands. "Please," he said, "I need help, anything. A place to stay, a job, just until I figure out what is next." Lucy stood behind him with her arms crossed, silent. I looked at her, then back at him. "Everything I built," I said slowly. "I left to the child who never asked me to disappear." Then I turned my wheelchair and rolled back toward my bedroom. "Leave your key when you go." He stood there for several minutes. I could feel him in the hallway, not moving, not breathing, just absorbing the reality of his situation. Lucy closed the door behind him when he finally left. That night, she didn't say much. Just made us both tea and turned on the evening news. But I could see the tension in her shoulders. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't proud of that moment. She was just relieved it was over, but it wasn't finished. Not entirely. 3 nights later, while Lucy was cleaning up after dinner, I spoke. "Call him back." She looked up from the dishwasher. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "He is still my son, and I will not let my child end up sleeping on the street, no matter what mistakes he has made." Lucy didn't argue. She found his number and dialed. When he answered, she handed me the phone. "Hello?" His voice was smaller, this time exhausted. "You can come back," I said. "There is no title, no salary, no authority. Just a place to sleep and food to eat if you are willing to help around here. I will not give you what I gave Lucy, but I will not let you fall completely through the cracks either." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "Okay, that was all. No thank you, no apology yet, just acceptance." He showed up the next day with a backpack and a cardboard box containing what was left of his possessions. Lucy didn't make a speech. She just pointed to the small storage room next to the laundry area. "There is a fold-out cot in there. You will need to put it away every morning." He nodded without complaint. No arguments, no negotiations. He put his things away, changed into clean clothes, and asked if there was anything that needed doing. That night, he washed the dinner dishes without being asked, took out the trash. Didn't speak unless someone spoke to him first. The next morning, he had coffee ready before anyone else woke up. By the 3rd day, he was helping me transfer from bed to wheelchair without fumbling or making me feel helpless. By the end of the first week, He was walking Lucy's business files to the post office without being told. He didn't complain, didn't ask about the company, didn't touch the laptop in the living room. And when a former business associate texted asking if he was still involved in commercial development, he replied, "I am stepping back. My sister runs everything now." Lucy saw the message accidentally and didn't comment, but I noticed her shoulders relax that evening. Something in our small apartment had shifted. Not dramatically, but enough to breathe a little easier. Brandon didn't talk much during those first few weeks. He just did what needed doing without being asked. Folded laundry, swept floors, took out garbage before it overflowed. When he cooked, which was rare, he made simple meals and portioned them the way Lucy preferred without making a production of it. He had changed. Not loudly or dramatically, but in the quiet way someone does when they realize the begging phase is over and all that is left is proving they deserve to stay. Lucy never smiled at him during those early weeks, but she stopped flinching when he passed her in the hallway. And when he fixed the broken handle on the bathroom cabinet without mentioning it, she left him half a sandwich in the refrigerator with a note that said, "Thanks." That was the first word she would written to him since the wedding. He didn't respond, just ate it quietly and washed the plate. Every morning he folded the cot and swept around it, so no one had to step over anything. He didn't ask for internet access. He didn't question why Lucy's name was on all the business correspondence. When packages arrived from our property management company, he carried them to the kitchen without opening them or asking questions. He was learning what silence could accomplish. I never gave him back any authority, never included him in business discussions, never invited him to meetings. But I let him help me with daily tasks without snapping at him. I let him assist with transfers when Lucy was out running errands. I let him walk beside my chair when I needed fresh air, and the first time he handed me a water glass without spilling a drop, I said, "Good." Just one word. But he heard it. That night, I found him sitting at the kitchen table staring at an old financial report he would printed weeks earlier. It was completely outdated. He knew that. But he seemed to need to look at numbers again, to remember when he was competent at something. Lucy found him there and paused in the doorway. He looked up but didn't try to explain himself. "I am not trying to get back in," he said quietly. "I just misunderstanding something." Lucy didn't say anything. She just turned off the light behind her and left the door open. That was permission enough. He stayed in his lane after that. Didn't post anything on social media, didn't reach out to former contacts. The people who mattered already knew where he stood, and the ones who didn't matter weren't owed explanations. When a former business partner contacted me directly asking if Brandon was back in the game, I replied with one sentence, "Brandon is not involved in business operations." No explanation, no emotion, just fact. That week, Brandon received an interview request from a business podcast he used to appear on regularly. He declined, saying he was focusing on family matters. The host didn't follow up. Kimberly had disappeared completely. No social media posts, no press coverage, no trace of her or whoever she would run off with. Brandon never mentioned her name, never cursed her out loud. But I saw his expression once when a news alert popped up about another lifestyle influencer caught in a financial fraud scandal. He closed the screen without reading the article. Lucy started including Brandon on small errands, post office, pharmacy, grocery store. He never went inside the important places, just waited in the car. When she came out of the bank one day, she handed him a document and said, "Shred this." That was the first real instruction she would given him since everything changed. He shredded it without asking what it was or keeping a copy. That night, I called both of them into the living room. Brandon sat at the far end of the couch, uncertain whether he belonged there. Lucy stood near the window with her arms folded. "This isn't a family meeting," I said. "This is me drawing a line in the sand." Brandon tensed. "You are staying here," I continued, looking at him. "Not because I owe you anything, but because I still believe people can earn their way back to decency. You lost your place at this table, but you didn't walk away from the wreckage. That counts for something." I turned to Lucy. You didn't ask for power. You just picked it up when it was dropped. You didn't chase a title. You handled responsibility. She nodded once, saying nothing. Nothing is changing on paper, I said, looking back at Brandon. You are not getting a company. You are not getting a position. But you are not on the outside anymore either. He didn't argue, didn't cry, just nodded with that same quiet acceptance he would been wearing for months. Thank you, he said. I believed it. Not because of the words, but because of how long he would waited to say them. That night, I rolled past the storage room where he slept. The cot was folded. The floor was clean. The pillow I would given him was arranged neatly on the shelf. I didn't say anything, just looked around and continued down the hallway. The next morning, Lucy had a conference call scheduled for 9 of the clock. Brandon brought her coffee at 8:45 and left it on her desk without speaking. She gave him a small nod. That became our new rhythm. No dramatic gestures, no forgiveness ceremonies, just routine, stability, and trust, rebuilt one small action at a time. Months passed. Brandon never moved out of that storage room. He never asked to. He treated it like a monastery, clean, quiet, humble, and I let him stay. One afternoon, while going through my mother's old recipe collection, I found a note tucked between 2 yellowed cards. It was in her handwriting. Leave something behind for the child who showed up when you didn't ask them to. I smiled and filed it away with documents marked for Lucy. It wasn't favoritism. It wasn't revenge. It was just truth. She had shown up. She had stayed. She had never needed to be right about anything. She would just refuse to let go. And in the end, that is who should inherit the world. Not the loudest person, not the most charming, not the one with the perfect wedding photos and the ambitious business plans, but the one who stayed when everything was ugly, the one who kept doing laundry while no one said thank you, the one who never once made me feel like a burden. I left her everything, not because I loved her more than Brandon, but because she never asked me to disappear from my own life. What would you have done in my place? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading your perspectives on family loyalty and standing up for yourself. And if this story resonated with you, check out these other videos about family drama and inheritance battles. You will not want to miss them.